Hello and welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultra Stock channel. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a video you see on my background. A bit of a rumor came out of nowhere, but today is a video that I personally really like. We're talking about rumors, transfers, not rumors that we invented, not Taylor Booth to Man United type of rumors, but rumors just like Aaronson that's concrete that he's staying at Leeds. So this video we're going to be talking about Weston McKennie, Ream, our prospects that are going to play in the Olympics, like McGlynn behind Brenden, and also Obed Vargas, which is not really a transfer, but it does pertain to where his career might end up going to in the future. So at first, we're going to analyze the big name, the biggest rumor right here that seems to be a swap deal. Brayden, you're first, just introduce us to the rumor, and what do you think about this possible swap deal? It's very rare to see them actually work out, but Weston McKennie could be heading back to the Prem. Are you in favor of it? Your take.
Yeah, this seems to be a Juve thing, doing swap deals. I remember the last big high-profile swap deal that happened in world football was with Juve and Barca, Pjanic going to Barca for Artur Melo. I don't think that really worked out for either side, so already not encouraging signs for Weston McKennie here, who looks set to be joining Aston Villa. Actually, as we record this, his agreement is the last one needed to complete the deal. Samuel Ealing Jr., his Juventus and now future Villa teammate, has agreed to the deal. Douglas Luiz obviously has agreed to go the other way to Juventus, and 20 million as well going to Villa, which is a big thing because they do have some financial difficulties. They're one of a number of Premier League clubs who maybe overspent a little bit last year and need to sell some players to balance the books by June 30th. So doing this swap deal technique, which they're also attempting to do one with Chelsea, trying to sell MLS legend John Duran to them and get some players in return. It seems to be the most effective way for them to bring in new signings and get their much needed squad depth that they'll need, because they are in the Champions League next season for the first time in over 40 years since 1982-83. They're finally back in Europe's elite competition, and they're going to need a little bit extra squad depth in order to survive in that competition, because we saw they went out sad in Europe last season, losing to Olympiacos, getting embarrassed over two legs, and they're going to need to have a bigger squad and more rotation to do well in the Champions League next season. But it's one that I think has a lot of controversy around it in terms of the fan opinions. The general negative perception for English fans around McKennie is concerning to me. I'm not saying it's not warranted, granted, because he was horrible at Leeds when he went there on loan, I guess 2 seasons ago now that this current season is over. But I do think it's a little unfair because, to be completely honest, I don't think a lot of English fans watch Serie A, and I don't think they've been seeing how good he has been for Juventus. It seems like a lot of Juventus fans haven't seen that either because they want him to leave, which, I mean, if you're getting Douglas Luiz in return, I can't really blame them for that. So it's definitely a risk going somewhere where the fans are already a little bit hostile towards you. But I will say, and I've said this in videos in the past, I trust Unai Emery heavily. I think he's a top manager, and Villa have a really special project building. It seems like the Premier League was the only realistic destination for Weston due to his wages and the valuation around him, and obviously the fact that Juve wanted Douglas Luiz as well. This is the one Premier League move that I think is the best option for him. I trust Emery, and if he really sees McKennie as an integral part of the system, I have faith that he can have a good season. Although I will say they are targeting Conor Gallagher as well in the swap deal, like I mentioned, for John Duran. And if they get him, there could be some problems arising regarding his playing time, since they do already have John McGlynn, Yuri Tielemans, and Boubacar Kamara coming back from injury as well in the midfield. But overall, I wouldn't say I love the move just yet, but I'm open to it, and I do think that there's a good potential for him to have a good season.
All right, and well, I'll just say my take. I don't think it's an ideal move. If I had to bet money on it and pull an Ivan Toney right here, I would actually say that Wes is likely not going to find life too easy at Aston Villa in the Prem. I hope that I'm wrong. I think that he has all the qualities to prove me wrong, but I just think that, like you said, a bit of a hostile environment. The Gallagher rumors really are discouraging for me. I don't know what type of role they see Wes playing, but I think that he will get minutes regardless of his form. I hope that he finds good form there and has a great summer with us. But yeah, it is a rumor. Let us know in the comments down below, guys, for every single one of these rumors. But this one, I think, is the biggest move that we could see for a USMNT player, looking very likely. Now, moving on to another A-teamer, and we're doing this by relevance of players. Not that we're calling other players irrelevant, but the A-teamers to the prospects, U23s. But here we are talking about Tim Ream now. Could be time for him to be going to MLS. I think this one's a little bit more brief because, well, I don't know you, Brayden, but I think it's about time. The clock's ticking, and Charlotte really interested in him. Seemed like it could be a perfect signing for St. Louis, playing in his hometown, but I think that he's heading back to Charlotte, heading to the U.S. to play for Charlotte. Are you a fan of this move? Do you think he could squeeze in another season in Europe?
Yeah, and before we get too far into this video, I think it's a good time to mention that we will be having almost weekly transfer updates. As long as there's enough news to report on, we will be having a transfer update for the USMNT players every week. Now, if there's not enough news in a certain week, we might push it back and do it bi-weekly, but there's going to be a lot of these coming out this summer, so stay tuned for that. And personally, these are some of my favorite videos to make, and I think that pertains to the fan base as well. But speaking about Tim Ream, you mentioned a return to St. Louis, where he grew up, as a potential option. That is where I thought he would go when he eventually came back to the MLS, and I do think it is probably his time to come home to MLS, see out the twilight of his career. It is sad to see him leaving Fulham because he is a club legend there. He's done so many great things there, but realistically, he wasn't going to get much playing time. He would, if he stayed, just be a locker room guy. They did extend his contract, so he could stay for them for another year, which wouldn't be the worst thing for their squad in particular, because I think he's a pretty good leader as a co-captain of the squad. But if in terms of actually wanting to get playing time and ending his career back in the States, I think it's a good move. Going to Charlotte, they're a relatively new club in MLS and seem to have a decent project. They have a great manager in Dean Smith, who's Premier League proven, very experienced in England. The one concern I do have is that if they don't sell their 22-year-old French center back, Adilson Malanda, who does have a lot of European interest, specifically in League One, since he is French, it could be hard to see Ream get minutes because Charlotte's defense has been very strong this year. Their center back pairing with Malanda and Privet has been very solid. They're tied for the second least goals conceded in MLS this season, which is very impressive. And I think Ream's going to have a real struggle breaking into that, assuming they do keep Malanda. I do think bringing in Ream probably might indicate that he'll be leaving, but also replacing a 22-year-old with a 36-year-old isn't usually something that you see clubs do, especially when they have a vision for the future. So I would have liked to see him go back to St. Louis City, maybe form a Tim partnership with Tim Parker, who's already there at the back, especially since it would have been a nice little fairy tale story. Also a relatively new club to MLS. I mean, we've seen USMNT players come from Europe and have success there, like Nico Giacchini. I think he would have been great there. But ultimately, Charlotte, if he does get minutes, it'll be a good move to end out his career. Although I will say, going back to MLS, it indicates that his time with the USMNT after this Copa America is probably over.
Absolutely. I think we should already be transitioning from that. And I think we saw in the friendlies that we had that his pace is gone and you need pace to play against players at the highest level. Talking about highest level, maybe it's a drop down in level, but I think it could be long term a very good move. Brenden Aaronson, he's going to be going back to Leeds on loan. Not on loan, well, on a permanent. He belongs to the club, but I'm really surprised with this one. And I would never bet that this would be the outcome of his season that he had with Union Berlin. Had a bit of turmoil here and there, ended on a high, but he's going back. And like he said, he spoke with Daniel Farke, and he's going to be part of their bid to promotion again. And I think that it is a good move. I'm a little bit puzzled about this one. What do you think, Brenden? Do you think that he can win back the fans? I don't know. That whole experiment was a little bit crazy, but your take on it?
Yeah, this is definitely a high risk, high reward move. Probably the most so out of all these players. So we already spoke about McKennie having hostility from fans, particularly Leeds fans. Brenden Aaronson has that as well. The fan reaction has been a little bit mixed. I would say there's, like I said, a lot of hostility there, but there are some fans that are willing to give him a second chance. They had a similar situation with Willy Gnonto, the young Italian international, last season, who did request a transfer out, ultimately didn't get it, and the fans grew to love him again. Hopefully the same thing can happen next season with Brenden, but he will have his work cut out for him since there's already such a negative perception. He'll have to hit the ground running immediately, but I will say, if he can continue his form that he had at the end of the season with Union Berlin, I think he'll be a great player in the championship. We all know he has the quality. It's just a matter of the physicality, and the championship is a very physical league, which is a little bit of a concern. He did say he put on 6 pounds of muscle, but given how lightweight he is, I think maybe he might need a little bit more than that. But it's a step in the right direction regardless, and I think it shows his mentality that he is willing to go back to Leeds, fight, and earn his place, earn back the respect from the fans that already have a pretty negative opinion on him. He said that he has unfinished business there, and he still wants to make himself a huge player for the club despite all that happened when he was with them a couple seasons ago. And like you said already, he had a great conversation with Daniel Farke, the manager, about the role he can play for the team and their future aspirations. I think ultimately this is a very risky move, like I said before, but if it does go well, it could go very well. I can easily see Leeds getting promoted back to the Prem. It could have very easily happened last season as well, and I think it'd be a completely different story if that did happen. But I think they'll be one of the best clubs in the championship, probably even fighting for the title. And if Brenden can maintain his form that he was in and really play a crucial role in the team, I do think he'll have an excellent season.
Yeah, I think that in order to win back the fans, and also with the USMNT fan base, which can be very critical of him, I think he needs to step up, not only to maintain the form, but step up with the finished product. Because if he finishes the chances he gets himself into, which props to him, alongside that work rate that he has, it could be a good move. But I think it's very risky. Now, one player that I think it's not really a risky move, out of the ones that we said so far, I think is the best one for a career trajectory. It's his brother, Paxten Aaronson, heading to Utrecht, going to be partner up with Taylor Booth, hopefully on the pitch, not on the DM, because that's where Booth finds himself these days the most. But Paxten heading there, I'm really happy and excited for him. Really nice to see that Frankfurt has a long-term vision for him. Sending out players on loan when they're young, it doesn't show that they're not disinterested. If anything, it's just a long-term project. Are you a fan of this one, Brayden? Do you think big things are to come from Brendan's younger brother?
All you have to look at is what the Frankfurt staff has said about Paxten, and the fact that they extended his contract for another additional year before sending him out on loan as well, which still hasn't been officially announced by the club, but I mean, if Tom Bogert announced it, it's as good as done. And I do think it's going to be a great move for him. He impressed last year at Vitesse, at one of the worst clubs in the Eredivisie, and clearly it proved that I think a solid mid-table, pushing up to the higher ends of the table club in the Eredivisie is the perfect destination for him. And he found that with Utrecht, like you said, potentially getting to play with, hopefully, Olympics teammate Taylor Booth, as long as he doesn't leave. They do kind of play similar positions, so it'll be interesting. And Booth has had some strong rumors about leaving in the past, unlike that Man United one that you mentioned at the start of the video. But he'll get to learn as well from 35-year-old Feyenoord legend Jens Toornstra, who I think is a very valuable leader in that team and has a lot of experience at the top level. So that'll be good. He could replace Oscar Fraulo in the team, who was on loan from Gladbach, Joe Scally and Jordan Pefok. Well, not anymore for Pefok, but their club last year. He played in a double pivot, a little bit more of a defensive role, but we did see Paxten dropping a little bit deeper with Vitesse, playing more as an 8 than a 10, and he did well in that role. So I think even if he does play in the double pivot as opposed to a 10, it's still a great move for him. He'll have so many more attacking opportunities than he did at Vitesse, and I mean, we all saw his quality. He was really the best player on the pitch for Vitesse every match that he played, and his goal assist numbers should go up drastically because he now has quality teammates that can help him finish the chances and get him into more opportunities. He didn't actually get a single assist with Vitesse, not due to a lack of trying, but a couple of chances that his teammates should have put away. With a stronger team at Utrecht, I think those assists will come, and they'll come in great numbers. But Utrecht have finished 7th each of the last 3 seasons, and they did miss out on European football in the final match in the Conference League qualification playoff final. A very disappointing result for them, and hopefully for them and for Paxten, he can help them push up the table and finally qualify back to Europe, where I think they belong.
Yeah, and I think that it's a good move because I'm not a huge fan of loans like Slonina's, where you go to a team where, well, just like Paxten as well, season with Vitesse, where you know that the club's not going to do well. But if as long as there's a challenge and there's a conceivable way and path for you to succeed, I'm really happy for him. I think it might be the best transfer so far. Even though he's not that hyped up, I think it's a really, really solid and wise career move. Now, his teammate in the Olympics, his captain for now, at least, Tessmann, he's getting linked out of nowhere to Inter. Now, I will say that even though Di Marzio is a very, very credible source, I think that the interest is there. It seems like it's very advanced as well. Torino are still in it because Vanoli is getting a noise announced on Tuesday, and they have said that they're still in for both Idzis and Tessmann. So maybe they're going to try to one up with the transfer fee. Those are the rumors because Tessmann's only going to cost 7 million, which I think is such bad business by Venezia. But are you a fan of this move, Brenden? They would be sending him out on loan for 1 year in Serie A, which I think is great because it makes him acclimate to the league. And also, Auxilio apparently, allegedly, said that there is a long-term vision that he comes back. If he impresses, they will push up Fratesi up the pitch, which I think is where Fratesi plays a little bit better. And Tenor could get some minutes next season. Do you think there is a long-term plan for him where he succeeds? What do you think about this move?
For me, getting loaned back to Venezia next season is the thing that saved this move, because if he was immediately integrated into the Inter Milan team, especially since he will probably be the captain at the Olympics, not having a full preseason with Inter, that would be a recipe for disaster. I don't think he'd play at all, and he would ultimately just become a marketing signing, which I do still have some concerns that he might be, because they are now owned by American investment fund Oak Tree Capital, and they haven't actually bought an American. They did buy Canadian Tejan Buchanan, who didn't have too big of a role in the team, at least at the end of last season when he was signed. So it could be a similar type thing for Tessmann. They have been trying to branch out to North America and establish more of a fan base there. And, signing players from that region helps a ton with that. But I do think if he can acclimate well to Serie A with Venezia next season, where he won't actually need the preseason as much because he's already so familiar with the club. I mean, he's even worn the captain armband at time. He's one of the best players at the club, probably the best, I would say. He's ready for Serie A, and after a good Olympics, I think he can come back and take the league by storm. If he does that, I could see a long-term future with him at Inter. It's a very hard team to break into as the out-and-out best team in Italy, one of the best teams in the world, as we know, recently making the Champions League final. But I do think, I believe in his level. I believe that he can eventually hit the level of Inter. It's just maybe it's a little bit too big of a step up too soon. Like you said, Torino could still be in for them. Them or Bologna were my preferred destinations because it's a step up to a pretty solid Serie A team, in Bologna's case playing Champions League football next season, but it's not too big of a step necessarily that he wouldn't be playing at all. And I do think ultimately one of those clubs would be a better move than Inter, but it looks like the Inter one is going to happen, and I'm completely open to it. I hope he can help Venezia stay up because it's going to be a huge season for them. They're going to be fighting pretty difficultly to stay up, and the two players that they're going to get from Inter Milan that are part of this deal, in all honesty, they were both out on loan last season. They didn't impress. I don't think they'll help Venezia in the slightest. So Tessmann will need to be at the top of his game to even help them stay in the league. I have my reservations about this move in general, but I do believe, like I said, I believe in his quality, and if he can have a good season at Venezia, having a full Inter preseason with no international football, hopefully at the start of the next season after this one, I think this move could work out.
Yeah, I would just say I back him to eventually hit that level, and I'm a fan of this move because even if he doesn't work out at Inter, he's going to have a contract with them. And in Italy, if you have the clout of having a contract like that, you get loaned to a club like a Torino, like a Bologna. But it still remains to be seen. I'm still hoping that Torino somehow comes in for him because I think he would start over Linetti quite comfortably, and work with his previous manager as well. But now talking about still staying in the Olympic side right here, we saw a player that was not left out. He left camp because he needed to finalize his deal. I still haven't seen it being confirmed, but Aidan Morris seems to be heading towards the championship. I think it's a great challenge for him. Props to him. Props to the crew, honestly, before anything, for selling him at market value. 4 million may sound cheap, but that's what the guy is worth. He plays CDM at MLS. Heading to Middlesbrough. Are you a fan of this one, Brenden? Do you think he will cut it out at that level?
Like you said, I think this move comes at the perfect time, and he is setting himself up for success, in my opinion. He finally gets the move after winning his second MLS Cup at the end of last season, playing a crucial role as one of the crew's best players, and making the run to the CONCACAF Champions Cup final this season as well, ultimately falling short to Pachuca, but that's a huge run to be proud of, and he's been so good in MLS. The concern has been the transition to the national team level. I don't think I've seen him play a good game for the national team at the senior level, at the U23 level, really in general. So I have a couple doubts as to how well he'll do in Europe, but I do think he made the right decision, not making too big of a step up to maybe a top 5 league that he's probably not ready for just yet, but going to a club, a very solid club in the championship who have ambition, they have a clear project, and I think it's working very well with manager Michael Carrick. They have a clear need in the midfield. Starman Hayden Hackney is probably leaving in the summer. Morgan Rogers went to Aston Villa last January. Matt Crooks came to MLS via Real Salt Lake last January. And Lewis O'Brien is returning to Nottingham Forest after his loan move with them last season. They do have interest in signing him permanently, but there is a clear depth in the midfield that Aidan Morris can fill. So I think it's the perfect move. Middlesbrough did almost make the playoffs last season. They ultimately only missed out by 4 points due to a really bad run at the start of the season, only picking up 2 points from their first 7 games, which actually does lead me to believe that you mentioned that he did leave the Olympic camp, the final one, the one that we just had, to try to finalize this move. He will still play one last game for the crew, a home game, like a send-off before the deal is finalized. Like you said, it hasn't been officially announced yet. But I do think he will not be at the Olympics. Not because he's not a good enough player, not because he won't make the final cut. I don't think Middlesbrough will release him because, like I said, they could have made the playoffs and even fought for promotion to the Premier League like they did the season before if they had a good start to the season. So having a good preseason with all the key players at the club and starting the season in a good run of form is going to be paramount to their success next year. And I do think if they do that, they have a very good chance to make the playoffs and fight for promotion. And imagine getting promoted to the Premier League. What a move it would turn out to be for Morris. So I do think ultimately he will not go to the Olympics. He'll stay for preseason. And I think that is the right move in the long run. It sucks for him that he'll get to miss out on such a big tournament. But ultimately for his career, I think this is the right move at the right time. And I'm wishing him nothing but the best.
Yeah, let's hope that he cuts out there. I have my reservations, but I really commend the guy for going there, and I hope that he finds himself. He's going to get minutes, definitely going to get minutes and improve under pressure, which is, like you said, for even U23s against France, he looked very bad under pressure against France, but I think that it's a great move for him. And McGlynn, right behind you right there are some links that maybe he could be leaving. And what do you think about this one? Where do you think that he would find what league suits his style better, Brenden? Do you think there is any validity on the rumors that he could get transferred right after the Olympics this summer?
Yeah, I have heard from multiple sources and ones that are pretty respected that he will be leaving probably this summer, but at the very latest, he will be gone to Europe by the end of next January, which is a thing that the Philadelphia Union, I mean, they're my club. I know them better than a lot of people. It's a thing that they like to do with Brenden Aaronson, with Paxten Aaronson, with Mark McKenzie. All these transfers were made in January after the end of the MLS season, and they ultimately went to their club halfway through the season, although I think for McKenzie it was the start of the season, and maybe actually for Brenden as well. But it is a thing that they like to do, finalizing the transfers sometime in the fall, but then officially making them obviously go to the club because they can't unless it's a transfer window in January. I do think that is something that could happen, but I have heard that there's a lot of interest this summer, particularly from the Eredivisie, which I think is the right destination. I mean, we've seen so many young Americans and young players in general go to the Eredivisie, flourish there, and then make the step up and have a great career, great seasons for bigger clubs in the top 5 leagues. So he's setting himself up for success if he does make that move. I have heard of some PSV rumors. I don't know if those are really valid. It's probably just because we know Ernie Stewart is the director there. He's brought in several Americans, and they played a crucial role last season in their incredible year, winning the Eredivisie, making a decent run in the Champions League as well. I do think that's a little bit too big of a step up. I mean, their current midfield duo of Verman and Schouten just started for the Netherlands in the Euro. So that just shows how good of a level their midfield is. I'd rather see him go to a club kind of like AZ Alkmaar, where we saw Mihailovic go. or Ajax, who are big clubs with big aspirations in the Eredivisie, but they play with a three-man midfield, and I think there is a spot there for McGlynn to fit in and play European football, challenge for a high spot in the Eredivisie, and ultimately make a name for himself, which he could do in the Olympics this summer as well. But it's the perfect stepping stone league to ultimately end up in one of the biggest ones. I still think that long-term La Liga is the perfect destination for him, and if he can have a good campaign for himself in the Eredivisie, assuming the move does happen. I mean, we saw it happen with Luca de la Torre very recently, going from the Eredivisie to La Liga. Hopefully that move could work out for McGlynn, and I do think I back his ability to do well there.
Yeah, and talking about backing a player's ability to do well, McGuire is getting rumored to go to the championship and also got rumored to Torino. Now, the thing that I said about the ability, I don't really back him to do well at Torino. I think it's too big of a step up. Honestly, Vanoli is going to go from working with Giampaolo to McGuire. It's a step down, in my opinion. But the move that I do like him is associated to Sheffield Wednesday. They were interested in him during the January window. We saw what happened with Blackburn, and Duncan himself said that it would take a lot of money in order for him to try to go there again to Blackburn. He specified Blackburn. He came back and made that clear. So I'm sure that he's open for that move. I hope that he does go. I think it's time for him to move. As a striker in MLS, you're not really going to improve anything. So I'm happy that he's going to do that. But are you a fan? Which move do you think suits him better, Brenden? Do you think it will happen?
Yeah, it's clear that McGuire has some scars from the January transfer saga with Blackburn, and to be honest, I do too. What a huge mess up from Blackburn, and I do think it's for the best that he probably won't be going there. I'll start with Sheffield Wednesday, since you mentioned that one first, and it's the lower level. They did just have Canadian Ike Ugbo play for them. He was on loan, although they do have heavy interest to sign him permanently. I think it'll come down between him and McGuire. If they can get McGuire, since there is rumored Serie A interest, like you said, he might be their first priority, but at the same time, Ugbo was crucial to them staying up in the second half of the season and remaining in the championship. So if they wanted to prioritize him, I wouldn't blame them at all. I think one of them will end up at the club. So we'll see a CONCACAF striker in the championship with Sheffield Wednesday regardless. I think his profile fits the championship perfectly. I mentioned in I think the end of season live stream that we did that he's basically just Gerald DK 2.0 regenerated, not necessarily in terms of profile. I do think they have similarities in their game, but just the fact that he came from college, went to Orlando City, now is trying to potentially make a move to the championship. It just seems like he's a couple of years behind DK, and to be honest, I think he has the ability to maybe even be the better player, and hopefully he doesn't catch the same injury bug that DK did. I think Sheffield Wednesday would be a good option for him. I think he would thrive there. That being said, I can't see him turning down Torino to move to a relegation-threatened club in the championship. It wouldn't make sense in any aspect. And I will move on to Torino now. They have a big striker problem. I can see why they're interested in McGuire, although, like you said, I did have initial doubts as to whether he is Serie A quality. I still have those doubts, but the fact is their top scorer, Duvan Zapata, was only on loan and has a very uncertain future. He's even been rumored to come to North or South America, which could happen as he is 33 years old, and eventually, even if he does end up staying at Torino for another year, he's not their long-term future. And he was their highest scorer by a huge margin. After that, a big drop-off to Antonio Sanabria, the Paraguayan international, who only had 5 goals as their striker, their second option. It's really not encouraging for Torino. They're a very respectable club. They had a solid season, but in order to make the next step, they're going to need to solve the striker problem. And although I do not think he's Serie A quality, I think he could do well there, because strikers with his profile have traditionally done pretty decent in Serie A. And like you said, I don't think he's as good as Giampaolo, who has also been somewhat rumored to Torino in the past. But if he was to go to a top 5 league, I think Torino is the perfect club.
All right. Well, I will disagree on that one. I think that it's a great move for him, but I think he would flop there. I'm sorry. I don't like to be pessimistic, but I just can't see a world where McGuire does well in Serie A for Torino. Moving on now to the last topic right here, perhaps one of the juiciest ones. Obed Vargas has announced that the country that he loves, the more that he feels more connection is AKA. I said it on my response there on the post that AKA I'm not really going to hit the 18 for the USMNT. The pool's way too large for now, so I'm going to switch over to Mexico. Now, those are harsh words, but in my opinion, this is something that USSF should see. Try to cut it out and crop out the players that are just using us to elevate their international careers. I think that he had huge hopes of being at the Olympics. Quite clearly, there are players better suited for that role than him at the moment, and he has switched permanently to Mexico. How do you see this one, Brenden? Do you think that he'll be an integral part of Mexico's future? Does this hamper his future long term? Because we know Liga MX is a lot more restrictive towards releasing their players to Europe. What do you think about this? Thoughts and overall?
There has been rumors that this happened because he didn't make the final Olympic roster. I mean, obviously it hasn't been announced yet, but it was pretty safe to assume, even before he made his one-time switch, that he wasn't going to be part of it. He hadn't been with the group since, I think, last October, so he was really cut from the group, and not unfairly. He did say that his goal was to make the Olympic team for the USA this summer, but it did become clear that wasn't going to happen, and to be completely honest, I don't think he's at that level just yet. Does he have the potential to be there one day? 100%, but right now I think it's a bit of a step up, and I think this could potentially be a product. I think I've mentioned it on the channel in the past. He played up a cycle. He was the youngest player for the USA squad at the U20 World Cup last summer. And it feels like, or I think he feels like, he's graduated from that level. He did recently decline a call-up to the U20/U19 camp for the USA, the final one before the CONCACAF Championship this summer, although it did come out that his one-time switch had already been filed before that call-up, which makes a lot more sense why he declined. But regardless, I don't think he would have accepted that. He feels his level is above that, and ultimately he thinks that staying with the Sounders for the summer would probably be a better option with his career, which I think is a completely fair take. It just brings up a problem for players that do play up a cycle, because when eventually the level to the next step gets a little bit too high, they and then are not willing to go back and play with their main age group, which has, in this case, led to Obed Vargas switching to Mexico. And there's been rumors, and I do think it'll happen, of several other key American-Mexican dual nationals switching to Mexico, like Brian Gutierrez, like Jonathan Gomez. I think both of those will end up happening sooner rather than later, unfortunately, because neither of them have been with the Olympic groups either. And like you said, maybe it is for the best for our future that we do cut out opportunities for these players who seem to maybe only be using us, because I think this move has been coming for a while. Vargas has always preferred Mexico to the USA. He's probably just been using us for opportunities because, like we know, Mexico, in a generational choke job, did not qualify for the Olympics this summer. So his only option internationally was to make that squad for the USA, or to potentially play at the U20 CONCACAF Championship for Mexico, which I don't think he'll do. He probably would have just stayed with the USA if he was planning to play at that tournament. I think he'll stay with the Sounders. And like you said, for Liga MX, I do think that we're going to see a lot of interest from Liga MX clubs soon. And that could be a downfall in his career, because he is a player who has the potential to go to Europe eventually. And we're seeing more and more cases of this. They're bringing players back from Europe, like Mark McKenzie's former teammate Arteaga at Genk. He's just one of many examples. Jorge Sanchez as well. They're bringing so many players back from Europe who maybe failed a little bit, but could still play at that level. They're bringing them to Liga MX, trying to create a national team, basically be the Liga MX All-Stars, which is not good for their future. I do think Obed Vargas has a future with the Mexican national team. He is eligible for the 2028 Olympics. So I think if he had stayed with the U.S., he'd be probably one of the best players with that squad at that point. I think this indicates that his goal is to make the 2026 World Cup squad for Mexico, which if he keeps progressing as is, and if Mexico continues to have very poor depth in all areas of the pitch, he could very well do. So I wish him the best of luck, unless he's playing against the USA, of course. And hopefully he'll get beaten by the USMNT many, many times throughout his career.
Yeah, I say just don't forget to close the door on the way out. Honestly, I don't think that it's a hot take. I never said really rated. I rate Obed, but I think that his frame, the way that he plays and how he's developing only in MLS, it's not going to translate well at the highest level anyways. Plenty of players similar age or in that bracket that they're a little bit older than him, but will still compete with him for the entirety of their careers, and I think that they're better than him. So let us know in the comments down below what you think about all of these rumors. What are the players that you think should be in the rumors, should be looking out for a move? And we're going to do at the end of the summer a complete recap of did these moves actually happen? How did it pan out? And how are things looking for the season that these players will have set up in front of them? So make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.